Hey everybody, welcome to the GMG review. Today I'm really excited to take a look at Kings of War 3rd edition, the game of fantasy battles. So this is the third round of Kings of War, and while it is a new edition, there are some changes. It's more, I would say, like a remaster than a brand new it's not as big a change basically as 1 to 2 was. It's still the game, if you played Kings of War 2, that you remember. The stat lines are like pretty much identical with a few added stats. Like most stats haven't, I mean, they've been tweaked, but they haven't changed what they do. If you look at a Kings of War stat line today, you're gonna know what it means. Certain values like unit strength has been added. We'll get into it when we jump into it. But this is the big hardcover version. This is available on its own. There's also a PDF that you can get if you're just a digital, you live in the digital age. But Ronnie sent me a copy and signed it, which I think is super cool. They really appreciate all my wonderful support of Kings of War. That's very nice of them. I did play a lot of Kings of War 2 with Owen, and we're pretty stoked to try it with 3. So, Kings of War 3rd edition. What is in the book? Well, the difference in this book and the 2-player starter set book, which you'll see if you check out my On the Paint table today, it's up on the cards. You'll be able to see the starter set box. I didn't open it up because it's packed with sprues, and they would have been everywhere. The softcover rulebook is basically exactly the same as this, just minus the flavor sections. But in here you're going to have all of the core rules of the game, the history of Panathor. So you're getting almost, I'd say, a third of the book. Is going to be actually more than that. It's 74 to 222 out of 388. So 160 pages are army lists and 63 pages are rules. So 166 plus 63, 220 something. So you're looking at 168 pages of fluff, basically. So tons of background, which I really like because Panathor was kind of undefined before this, the whole Mantic world thing. It did have some history and background. A lot of it came out of the board game, the Dungeon Saga game, where you got kind of like tidbits of what was going on. The heroes all had names and the cities they went to and stuff. And they've expanded on that a great deal and given like a real set layout. So I do like it. It has a real old world feel, but with its own nations. And there's its own kind of like drama happening in the background and stuff too. So we're going to go through, I am going to do a core rule overview because I think it's useful to do that and just kind of put things in context from getting started. So first thing you need, put together miniatures. So Kings of War is a bit different. If you haven't played it before, you can play it as a traditional rank and flank. Here's a tray. I fill it up with the appropriate base size miniature type of game. But you're never going to take those miniatures off the base. So one of the things I like about it, and if you see my Ogre army, again, it's my On the Paint table, is that you get to make, instead of making just units, you can make a baby diorama. Because units are either alive or dead, and they have the amount of damage on them. Basically, they're like big squares that you can make a beautiful diorama. And I really enjoyed it about the game because your unit looks pretty right till the end. Basically, if you spend a lot of time on a unit, one of the things that I remember about Warhammer Fantasy Battles, you'd have these units of like 3 or 4 guys left limping around at the end of games, and it didn't look as cool because it's mostly just movement tray. You know what I mean? Like it's just this big empty movement tray with like a bunch of casualties have been removed, and there's a couple guys. In this one, you have a big wound dial usually on, or a stack of dice. But everyone's either alive or dead. So you get to look at your pretty miniatures for the whole game. And the table doesn't get as messy because there's not random casualties scattered around or, being used to take track of like how many wounds taken in combat or whatever. You just have a dial or you have a stack of dice instead. And then once you got that put together, you're going to be looking at what kind of units you have. So they have used a standard base footprint for everything. So for instance, like a Titan, they're going to be on a 75 millimeter square base. A monster typically is on a 50 by 100 or 50 by 50. If it's like a small monster, it's 50 by 50. If it's a 50 by 100, it's like a chariot-sized monster, like a big squid or something. And then down from that, war engines, they're usually 50 mil square, so like that's like your artillery. Large infantry, monster infantry, swarms, and large cavalry, they're typically on 40 to 60s. It depends on which one they are. If they are large infantry, they're on 40s. If they're monsters, they're on 50s. So like my ogres, for instance, are on 40 mil bases. My snow trolls from my Northern Alliance will be on 50s. Chariots, they're on a 50 by 100, just like a monster is, if it's a kind of a chariot-shaped monster. Cav are on 25 by 50, so a standard like Warhammer Fantasy Cav style base. And then infantry and heavy infantry are 20 mil and 25 mil, so it's the difference between like an Empire Soldier and a Chaos Warrior for Warhammer Fantasy Battle reference. I'm assuming that if you've never played this game before and you haven't heard of it already, you've come here for rank and flank games, which means you might have some historical or Warhammer stuff. And then heroes are all on whatever base type for the class they are, because there could be hero titans, there could be hero large infantry, there could be hero infantry, whatever the standard base size is for the unit they represent. And then they give an exception for like, if you have a crazy big miniature, you can put it on the just barest minimum size base that you have for whatever that miniature is. And there's your unit footprints, movements, trays, and multi-bases. So one of the things that you have to have is whenever you do a sort of like scenic basing thing, where you don't have exactly the right number of miniatures, there's a minimum model. So like the minimum model count for instance, infantry, if it's an infantry troop of like 10 models, so it would be, if it's 20 millimeters, it would be 40 by 100. No. Yeah, 40 by 100 is 8. So you have to have at least 8 miniatures on the tray to represent that unit. So it just means you can't put like squares down and have one guy on them and say this is my unit. There's no cheating. There's a minimum model count. And then for 40 by 40, the troop footprint, there isn't one, but it's at least 2 miniatures for a regiment, 5 miniatures for a horde, and then 9 miniatures for a legion. So that's pretty cool. It means that like my ogres, I think they look better in like an almost old epic style formation where they look like the 5 on a die. It just looks better to me. I don't know why. I don't like them ranked up. I don't think they should look like a horde coming towards you. It's kind of like a little more loose formed. And then yeah, and so like a troop, a regiment, and a horde, or a legion. A troop is the minimum size, so like if it would be 10 guys, typically of whatever size they are, 3 if they're large and monstrous infantry. A regiment would be 20 if it's a small guy, so an infantry model, and then 5 if it's a cavalry model, and then 3 if it's like 6 if it's 3 if it's horde infantry. There are no troops of cavalry and large infantry and swarms. And that doubles to horde and quadruples to legion. So like let's say you had 20 Empire Spearmen as a regiment, 10 Empire troops as a regiment, they'd be like 10 human-sized troops. They'd be 20 for a regiment, so a 20-man block, and then they'd be 40 for a horde and 80. So think of 4 blocks of troops put together if they were a legion. And so very often it's just easier to make scenic movement trays for a legion, because for a legion you're talking about something that is, oh Jesus, it's 160 by 200. So it's 200 by 120, my bad. It's just an enormous amount. And so just some examples and stuff too. So then you have your characteristics. You have a front, left, right, and rear arc, and it's all 45-degree angles. So no matter what the shape of your unit is, it's going 45 off the front. So you don't necessarily go corner to corner, because that's not going to be correct. It's always 45. It's something to remember. And then leader point, the leader of your unit should be in the center. So that's where you're going to be doing all your measurements from when you're determining line of sight and measuring range. Stats, you get your types. That's what your base size is typically. Your unit size, how many models. Your speed, how fast you move in inches. Your melee, so that's the dice roll to hit in melee. Your range attack, that's the dice roll to hit with range attacks. Could be dash if you don't have a gun. Defense, that's what your opponent has to roll to wound you, so higher the better. So a lot of people, they're used to like a low number being good for armor saves. No, in this point you want high. Think of it like your toughness, it's what they have to roll to wound you. And then your number of attacks, how many attack dice you roll when you attack. Your unit strength and height, so how tall you are, what you can see over. And your unit strength is your ability to be on the table. A lot of games, for instance, if you want to hold a zone, you score by having more combined unit strength than your opponent. Characters are typically 0. Hordes and legions might be 3 or 4. Regiments 2 or 1. It depends on kind of like the quality of your troop too. So base size isn't necessarily representative of that stat. You kind of have to look case by case, because crazier units can have a higher unit strength just because they have a bigger battlefield presence, which makes sense. I like that it has a thematic impact on the game. Your nerve, so what you have to roll to waver or destroy you. It's usually a split stat. If they don't have a first stat, they can only be destroyed. So think of it like Dwarf Slayers. If you don't have a first stat, it means you never freak out and panic. You only are dead. You're either all dead or you're all alive. But if you have a waver stat, when you're wavered, all you can do is halt or retreat. And when you get your next turn, you're basically freaking out and you have to reorganize yourself. It's kind of like a stun effect. Points, how many points you are, and then any special things like your range equipment, special rules, whatever. And those are your vital stats. So front arc and line of sight, it's all from your leader points. Measuring distances should be from your leader points. Unless otherwise specified, the distance between units is the distance between 2 nearest points in their bases. Sorry, certain things use leader points, certain things don't. And then always stay an inch away from the enemy when you move. And there's only 3 phases in the game. Now, one of the things I like the most about Kings of War is how clean it is and how quick it plays. It's very snappy. And the reason it's so snappy is you don't ever interact with your opponent during the turn. This is an Alessio game originally, and it's got a very Alessio rule system where it's very clean. It's very, the rules are very like well defined. So movement, you get issued an order in the movement phase. Either halt, which means you don't do anything. You can change facing, so it's don't do anything but pivot and face any direction. So you normally get 1 90-degree turn, but you can just turn around any direction you want. You can advance, so you can move your speed, and during that move you have 1 pivot. So there's no wheeling in this game, but you can pivot to 90 during your turn. That's why I put, if you look at on the paint tab, I put spinners underneath my units. You can go back, move straight backwards up to half your speed value. Sidestep, again, same thing, move sideways up to half your speed value. At the double, move exactly, or move straight forward up to double your speed, but you have to go straight, no turns. You can charge, and that's where you get to move, basically, but it's a bit more complicated. You get 1 turn, and then you move twice your speed into the enemy. Some rules can increase that, like wild charge. And if you touch the enemy, you get into combat. Then you have your unit interpretation. So friendly units you can move through if you want, except when charging. Enemy units you can never come within 1 inch of unless you're charging, disengaging, or during a pivot. So if you can pivot over them, if you move away afterwards, you're okay. Or if you pivot off of them afterwards, you're okay. And then disengaging. So if you start engaged, you can move 1 inch back before you disengage to help you get out of where you're supposed to be. Sometimes if you're engaged with units, you need to kind of pop back before you make your move, because you might have to move sideways or backwards. It's going to half your rate, so they give you like a 1 inch pop back first. And then charging. So you have to be able to be partially in your front arc, so your front 45. You can draw a line of sight to the target and the leader point as described on page 15, so you'll be able to see them with your leader point. And then distance between any point your unit's front facing and the closest point in the unit's base is less than or equal to double your unit's speed stat, and there's enough space for you to physically place them in contact. And you move in 3 ways. You move, you can make 1 pivot if you want, and as soon as 1 point touches, you'll align. When you align, you'll leader point to leader point, so you shift over to be touching leader points if you can. Multiple charges, they share as much as the front as they can, trying to keep it equal, so both would have to be 2/3 engaged if they can. And then shuffle to center. So you slide in, whoop, close, and then shuffle to where you're supposed to be. Flanks and rears are the same thing. You just consider the leader point to be the middle of the unit, and it's where your leader point defines where you are. So if your leader point's in the front, you're charging the front. If it's in the right, you're charging the right. And if it's in the rear, you're charging the rear. And corner-to-corner charges are not allowed. If you end with 1 inch over the enemy, it's okay. You just bump them back slightly to be outside of 1 inch. And then multiple charges, like I said, you try and share it as much as you can, having the same amount engaged. So like a regiment individual character, they're both going to try and get to be off the same amount, percentage-wise, not actual like distance. And then countercharge. So if you start engaged, you don't actually get to fight unless you get a countercharge. And this is where wavering comes in. If someone charges you, does enough damage to waver you after the nerve check, you basically can only halt or move back. So you're either going to halt and stay engaged with them and not do anything, or you're going to move back afterwards. Countercharging is you have to declare to countercharge. So if you start the turn engaged, you want to fight, you have to say we're charging in, we're going to push back against the enemy. That's a pretty important order. And then terrain. Open terrain, you can move across it normally. Blocking terrain, you can move across it, but blocking terrain you can't move across. You can pivot through it as long as you don't start on top. Like it's just like enemy units, you can pivot over as long as you don't end your pivot there. And it blocks line of sight. Difficult terrain, when moving at the double, you treat it as blocking terrain, so you can't march over top of walls and stuff. If the unit's leader point is in a piece of difficult terrain, then the unit ignores that piece of difficult terrain when checking line of sight, otherwise it impacts line of sight. If a charging unit has to go through difficult terrain, it becomes hindered, which means you're -1 to hit and you lose certain rules like thunderous charge. Basically charge bonuses go away. And then obstacles, they're a lot like difficult terrain, can't march across them and stuff, but they can cause cover. And hills are considered open, but you add the height of the hill, which you define before the start of the game, to the height of the unit. So it allows you to see over top of stuff. So if you're on a height 3 hill and you're height 2, you're height 5 for the purpose of seeing 2 other units, to and from other units. And the range phase, pretty simple. You pick a line of sight unit, you roll a hit, you roll a damage. So you pick up all your dice so that you have a number of attacks. Doesn't matter if your number of attacks is ranged and melee. Doesn't matter what it is, but your stat might be different. So a unit that's like kind of crappy with sharp bows, like it's like an outrider unit of like cavalry or something, that'd be okay in melee. They might hit on a 4 in melee, but have a 5 to hit with shooting. They still have like 9 dice. So you'd roll 9 dice, 4 hit if you're in melee, 5 hit if you're shooting. You're -1 to hit if you move during the turn typically, and you just have a rule that ignores it. And then you roll against your opponent's toughness. So the opponent's defense stat, you'd roll the number of hits that you get again, and then everyone is a wound afterwards. There's no armor saves or anything. You just stack wounds on the unit basically to see if you damage them or not. Units that start the turn engaged must first disengage in order to move. But if you do a, if you're issuing them like a go back rule, then you'd basically be -1 to hit. Units that are only engaged with enemies that are yielding don't have to disengage in order to shoot. So you can actually shoot while you're engaged with the character, because characters are typically not considering to be engaging anyone. They have the yielding rule, which means they're unlike most enemy units. You can actually move through enemy characters because they're just little, and you can shoot them as well while you're engaged. You can shoot while you're engaged. And then all your ranged weapons have a stat usually, which is like a range. If it has any special rules, like for instance heavy crossbows or piercing 2, they get to add 2 to any defense rolls. So if you're 5+ defense, pretty good. You'd be 4+, 3+ to wound if you had piercing 2. And then yeah, you can roll a hit and shoot and stuff. Cover can impose penalties, and then melee is the exact same thing. Roll a hit, roll a damage, and then test against nerve. So in the shooting phase, you do all your shooting, and then everybody tests nerve at the end. So at the end of the range combat phase, you do all your wounds you do across both armies, and then you make nerve checks, because you don't know who's routed or not until afterwards. In the melee phase, everyone engaged in a fight will attack, and then you immediately make the nerve check before you go on to the next combat. It's the exact same process. Use your melee attack. Check your number of dice you attack with. Roll to hit using your melee stat. Roll to wound against your opponent's defense stat. Crushing strength or thunderous charge can impact that. So if you're charging in a turn, you have thunderous charge 1. You add 1 to your defense stat rolls when you're trying to wound them. Same with crushing strength. Add whatever the crushing strength value is. And then if you rout somebody, you get a bonus. So you can do one of these following things. You can pivot on your center to face any direction after you kill somebody. You can move directly towards 2d6. So you can go forward. You can go left D3 or left or right D3 or back D3. When you test nerve, you roll dice and you add the current number of wounds in the unit. So they pile up over time. Units get more damaged over time. And there's a new rule in the game, which I really like, that a regiment that is, what is it? And over its top nerve value, even if it hasn't read it, because Snake Eyes will always keep it on the table, is now like super damaged, and it gets penalties to moving and stuff too. And if you're wavered, you may engage. If you're disordered, if they get damaged at all, they become disordered, which means they can't get their thunderous stuff when they charge back in and stuff as well, and they can't make range attacks either or cast spells. And so yeah, 2d6 current wounds against whatever their wavering and destroyed stats are. But exceptional results, double sixes, you're doomed. If they're not routed, but you get a double 6, they count as a wavering. So you can always waver on boxcars, even if they're not hitting the wavering number. 1 wound, you can still waver them on boxcars and cause them a freak out. And the double ones hold your ground. No matter what, you're always going to be able to stay. But if you're devastated, that means that you've taken more than your total nerve number in wounds. Then you reduce, you reduce all of your attacks, unit strengths, and spell stat values by half, rounding down. And you mark it with the appropriate token. War engines are a little bit different. War engines cannot be ordered to move at the double or to charge while moving. They treat all obstacles as blocking terrain because they're hard to move around. In melee, units attacking them always triple their attacks because it's like 2 guys in a cannon, right? So no matter who, basically you're always counting as being rear charged if you're the crew of a melee weapon or of an artillery piece. And then front arc is 50 mil wide no matter how big the base is. So their line of sight is always going to be 50 mil. Like if they're not on a 50 mil base, it's always considered to be 50 mil for seeing. So you can't cheat and put them on exceptional base and get more vision. Individuals. Typically, if you have the individual rule, so like my monstrous heroes, my ogre army don't get it. In this game, you can pivot to face anywhere before you get your order. So it just makes little guys a little bit more sort of like able to get around where they need to be. And then yielding means, like I said before, you don't count as being an enemy unit if people want to move through you, and they don't count as engaged for shooting and stuff too. And then special rules, there's tons of them. Things like aura, big shield, blast, and all of these things will combine to make your stats, different. Make you hit harder in melee, make you harder to hurt, give you wounds back. There's a bajillion different things you can do. And then picking a force. Now this has stayed mostly the same. The primary thing that's changed in this is that the number of things that big guys unlock, it actually affects me more than most armies, has changed. So typically, you can take an unlimited amount of regiments, hordes, and legions. Those things you can always have. And each one of those you take, so it starts with big boys and then it goes to toys afterwards. There's that old saying, boys before toys. In this game, that's the whole point of the game. Every regiment unlocks 1 hero, monster titan, or war engine. So every regiment you can have one of the following, but not all 4. So you have to have a regiment for every cool special thing. For every horde, you get 1 each of the following. 1 hero, 1 monster titan, and 1 war engine. So you can take 3 toys basically for every horde. But they penalize, because some armies only really take hordes, like the large infantry, like the ogres and the trolls and stuff. They kind of got too many toys that way. So now you can pick 2 from the list as opposed to getting all 3. You can have 1 hero, 1 monster, 1 titan, 1 war engine. You can't double down, so it means that my units don't unlock as fast, basically. And then legions are treated as hordes for army composition. Now you also get 2 troops for every regiment, so that means 2 undersized, like 10-man units for every 20-man unit, basically. You get 4 for every horde and legion. So you could have 4 10-man units for every horde and legion army. And those are like your little flanking units, your outriders, your fast cabs, stuff like that. You can max duplication, so the most of anything you can have in a 2001 game is 3. So I've maxed out my ogre regiment. That's all you can get is 3 ogre regiments. And for every 1,000 points on top of that, you get +1. So basically in an average 2001 game, you get max of 3 of any one thing. Irregular units always count as troops. So for instance, a lot of shooting units count as irregular because they don't want your whole army to be able to shoot. It isn't a shooting game. It should be a maneuvering game. So my ogre shooters, the big crossbows, for instance, count as regular. They have an asterisk and certain things, so you don't unlock any additional troops monsters and heroes, and they count as one of your troop selections. I don't usually take a lot of troops, so it's not really a big deal. But it means you're not getting anything special for them. And then some units have upgrades, you pay extra points, give them extra toys. And then allies, a quarter of your list can be allies. Now they can never have, you take special characters usually, and they can never have any of your upgrades and magic items, but they follow all the same rules for army selections. If you want to have like a big monster from somebody else's army that allies with you, and also they have to be either neutral or in the same camp as you. So neutrals can ally with anybody. Good can only ally with other good armies and neutral armies, evil with other evil armies and neutral armies. So I kind of like my ogre army because I can just play with any toys I want. You have to follow those same restrictions. So if I want a monster, I got to take a regiment first. If I want 2 troops, I can take. If I took 1 regiment of bad guys, for instance, like orcs, Morax, or Axe, something like that, I could get an orc crudger, boss on a big monster, and then 2 units of like the wolf boys if I want. It's kind of cool. It's just a neat way of taking like different people's spaces, and it means the army like composition is a bit more dynamic because you can add and subtract things from other armies if you want. And that's artifacts. Everybody gets an artifact except if they're a war engine, a monster and titan unit, they can't get any. But hero monsters and hero chariots and hero titans definitely can. So like your character riding a chimera or whatever can. Unique units like special characters with the 1 limit cannot ever choose artifacts, and allies can't take any artifacts. And there's tons of them. Common ones like blades and fire oil, and they typically give you special rules. So like pipes tear give you brutal, +1 on nerve checks against your enemy. Chain of Hate gives people vicious, reroll 1s to wound. And if it has a split value, the first value is if you give it to a regiment, the second is if you give it to a horde. Because you get more value out of a special item if it's given to something with more dice. So they make you pay more points for it, which is kind of cool. And most of these are the same as in second. A few slight changes to how they work. And then magic. Lots of people have spells. Spells are basically just shooting attacks. They happen the same as a ranged attack, so all the rules for ranged attacks apply to them typically, but they always hit on 4+. That's the main difference. They always hit on 4+. They ignore all normal to hit modifiers, and successes will usually generate an effect. So some of the effect is you take a hit. Some of the effect is whatever the sort of like effect described is. So like Enthrall will pull units towards you. Fireball does damage. Heal, every hit is you get a wound back, so some can target other people. And who they can target? Enemies, they can be used in close combat. Friendly can be used in close combat. Friendly self for close combat for heal. Enemy unit. That's certain people can only be targeted by certain effects. And then scenarios. There's 12 different scenarios. I would say this is the biggest change to the game because the addition of unit strength. And the basic process is pick a scenario. Pick your army. Choose a game area. 6x4 is a typical. Determine a scenario by rolling a d12. Place all the terrain. Set up and decide who goes first and how long it's going to go. It's usually 6 turns, 7th turn on a 4+. Deployment's always the same. Setups A and B, got to be 12 inches from the middle, and that's it. And that's the table center point. So there's also things like loot counters, which you can pick up. They reduce your speed to 5 and you can't fly. Bluff counters, which are basically victory points that you don't know how many they are, so your opponent can put them down and fake out who's going to be fighting for what. And then objectives, which are fixed points in the battlefield. They're all 25 mil bases, and they all score depending on the scenario. I like Invade a lot. We played Invade just this week against Chase's Goblins, my ogres. At the end of the game, out of the total unit strength of each player's units that have the majority of their footprint in the opponent's half of the board, and that's your VPs for the game. So what you're trying to do is kill your opponent and get to his side of the board, and the more unit strength left at the end of the game that's over there is your victory point total, and you compare victory points to you won. The margin of victory is typically based on the game size. And there's 9 different scenarios. And the game is also made for chess clocks if you want. So this game actually works, of all the games that use chess clocks, this one works really well because you never clock back and forth. It's just your whole turn, your opponent's whole turn. It's not at all, it's not stressful because you're not having to clock back and do armor saves and stuff. I really like it. And then, yeah, if you time out, a player times out of time, they must immediately put their dice down and make no further dice rolls for the rest of the game. If there's any unresolved combats, they're simply left engaged. During the remainder of the game, the player may not issue any orders, roll any dice, including the rules, and such as regeneration. Then the player still has time remaining, they just continue playing as normal. So basically, you just stop playing, your opponent keeps doing turns until their time runs out too. So don't clock yourself. And that's the core rules. And then we're into the beautiful color section, so tons and tons of color stuff. The Abyssals, the Abyssal Dwarves and their Orcs, the Night Stalkers who are super cool. I love this big giant variation. The Orcs who have a lot of cool new models too. And I would say this is where Mantic has done the most improving in the last little while. Their new miniatures for the Night Stalkers and the Northern Alliance are fantastic. And then the whole history of Panathor. And it goes into every single race with maps, beautiful maps. The story of how the gods created everything, you know, the history of time, and all of the individual armies get their own section, which I think is fantastic. Great art, full color. I think the maps are my favorite part. Like every race gets their own map of like their region basically they live in. How cool is that? They've dug a pit in the ocean and just dammed it off. That is so cool. All the different elves. Northern Alliance, that's my new faction. The neutral forces, so like the force of nature, because they just care about nature. The Ogres, my army, and Grokkagamok, sorry, and the Granite Fists, his like mercenaries, which is what I built. Trident Realms, it's Owen's building, all their weird monsters and stuff. And the Forces of Evil, like look at how cool that is. The Abyssal Dwarves, the Empire of Dust, and the Force of the Abyss. It's really well realized. The background's a lot of fun. It's very high fantasy. Doesn't take itself too seriously. And then we're in armies. And every single army list for the core, for all the miniature, like the armies that Mantic makes miniatures for are in here. So Basileans, I say bazillions. I think it's supposed to be Basileans. Dwarves, and they're in the good faction, elves, Northern Alliance, Force of Nature. That's the neutrals now. So all of those, the dwarves, the Northern Alliance, the elves, the Basileans, they can all ally with each other. Force of Nature, we're in neutrals now, can ally with anybody. The ogres, neutrals, can ally with anybody. The Trident Realm, they're neutrals, they can ally with anybody. And we're into evil with the Abyssal Dwarves. Everybody loves Chaos Dwarves. How cool are they? Look at that. Yeah, silly hats for everybody. I love it. Silly hats and Obsidian Golems. And they have a Lamassu, the Great Winged Half-Breed. Empire of Dust. Force of the Abyss, Demon Monsters and Mans. The Goblins, because you have a Goblin army on its own. I love that the Goblins are their own thing in this, and they're amazing. Night Stalkers, which are like the weird nightmare horrors, like the extraplanar horrors. I love this thing, the Mind Screech. I should build my Night Stalker army next. I should just do evil. I shouldn't do good. Why am I doing good? Orcs, I have an Orc army to build too, actually, which I should also build. Look at how cool they are. I love the Crudger on the Wing Slasher. He's so cool. And Crudger on a Gore. Oh, that model's awesome. They're badass. And the Undead. Everybody loves zombies. Zombies and Great Burrowing Worms and Zombie Trolls and Vampire Lords on Dragons. All that good stuff. And actually, the plastics for Mantic's Ghouls, Skeletons, and Zombies are fantastic. They're really, really nice. Which is what the bulk of your army is going to be. And that's it. There's my look through Kings of War, the Game of Fantasy Battles. I'm stoked for it. It is, if you're looking for a game where you can use any miniatures, Mantic has a range of miniatures for all the armies in this book, but really any of your miniatures can find a home here. And you like rank and flank combat, and you want to be able to play 2 or 3 games in a day and not feel exhausted. It's a great game. I like this game because you feel like you have agency. You've got pre-measuring. You can plan out and do all your moves. There's no gotcha moments because your opponent can't really do anything. You left a unit in charge range, you know you have. And it has great replayability and a really good community too. So I highly recommend checking it out. I'll link the website and of course the Facebook group for it as well in the video description below. So big thanks for watching. We'll see you for more GMG reviews. Thanks, Mash. Stop worrying. I hope you enjoyed that video. If you want to support the channel, of course, like and subscribe and hit the little bell below so you get notifications when I post future content. I do post stuff 7 days a week. If you want to support the channel further, you can, of course, buy a t-shirt through Spreadshirts, buy a measuring gauge or objective markers from Death Ray Designs, or, of course, most importantly, there is Patreon. Patreon is what makes all this possible, keeps the lights on, pays for the studio costs, pays for the equipment, model costs, and everything else, and most importantly, puts food in my kids' bellies and a roof over their heads. Big thanks to everyone, past, future, who supported me. I do this stuff because of you guys, and of course, I will continue doing it as long as I can.